The world is currently filled, in my opinion, with people that are entitled, and you need to remove that mindset. You cannot enter this type of industry with an entitled mindset. You need to be willing to work as hard as you possibly can for little to no reward in order to pave your way into this industry. If you're not prepared to do that, you will never succeed in this industry.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. My name is James Grigson, and today we're joined by the head of performance for Sydney FC. It's Elias Bourkarim. Elias, thanks for coming on, mate.
Thank you.
It's really good to have you, mate. I'm really interested in your journey. Obviously, now the head of performance at Sydney FC, but your background, your studies was predominantly in physiotherapy. I really want to take a look and a journey through everything that you've done. But first, right now, you got an off day today. You had a few games earlier in the week, or over the weekend, I should say. How's everything going with the Australian football that you look after and the club, Sydney FC? How's everyone adapting to the recent situations, and how's the team going?
Yeah, look, the team's doing well. Results have been okay. We kind of, a bit of a weird time. We broke away, and I think all we needed was basically 1 point to secure top of the table. So we did that, and I think the toughest part, or the greatest challenge since coming back, is kind of less to do with the COVID scenario and more to do with trying to create incentives for the guys to continue to win. That's probably the greatest challenge, knowing that each game since we've secured top of the table doesn't really bring anything else other than it's just a game. So trying to find ways to motivate the lads is probably the biggest challenge until the final series, that is.
That's fascinating. I'm interested in that. So if you're able to share it, or what sort of messaging or methods are you putting in place to try and motivate these lads?
Yeah, look, I mean, some of them you would just hope that they would be motivated by winning, because sometimes just not losing is incentive enough. Obviously, in the A-League, you're not getting bonuses. In Europe, each game matters because there's a financial incentive. There's a reward for winning. Our guys, I think, are motivated by a few things. Number one, I think the biggest thing, you've got to create competition for places. If you can create competition for places, then you create motivation. People will play because they don't want to lose their starting position in the team. That's one. And then just knowing that, I think it's got to come from the top. If the head coach gives you no excuses, then you better believe that you better leave everything on the park. If the coach wants to see you win, then you have no option but to try and do everything to win. And if you're not getting that visual, and it looks like you're becoming a bit complacent, then I think the gaffer will let you know about it. So it's probably the biggest two things is just not losing is one incentive, and then the other one is competition for places, and then the rest just sorts itself out.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're always going to have those athletes that are just going to want to win no matter what, right? So you give people an opportunity to slack off, and there will be some that take it. I wanted to talk about the football environment. In some cases, it's not the most advanced practice or sport in high performance, but in some factors and some facets, it is. Some of the innovation coming out of football, the research papers coming out of football, the brains and minds inside of football from a high performance sports science perspective has pushed our industry forward. It's a very interesting dynamic, and that's, at least from my opinion. I wanted to talk to you about that because I see a lot of, or I have encountered, not a lot, but I've encountered a few people that are of the belief that skills pay the bills. Practice the sport, you'll get your cardio, you'll get your speed, you'll get your footwork, you'll get your agility around the ball just from playing. And we don't need any of that gym stuff. We don't need any of the running stuff. Just get the skills in. Have you encountered that across your career? I know you've been in football for a while. Have you encountered that across your career? And what's your take on that as football, as a sport within our industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of merit to that statement, and you argue you could have every single, you could have all the physical capabilities, but you don't have the skill. You're not going to get anywhere. I mean, perfect example is look at Usain Bolt. He's come here for a bit of banter with Central Coast Mariners, and he's the fastest man in the world, but doesn't necessarily mean he's going to slot in behind the line and score every single time. So there's a fine balance, but I do agree that there's probably a delay in the uptake of sports science in the football world, and that's largely driven by kind of old school mentality where, as you said, just everything is driven by the football itself. As the game's evolved and the physical requirements have increased, and they have increased significantly, I think I was looking at statistics more recently. I think in the last 10 years alone, the physical output required of the players compared to 10 years ago is about 30%. And that's like across, across several different variables. So it's not even like it's 5-10%. We're talking 30% increase in some of your high speed metrics, some of your acceleration metrics, some of the metabolic power required to complete a 90-minute game. And that's been driven by the fact that every single club now is trying to get the edge, and that's where I think sports science has come into play.
Yeah, and you think about the amount of games that are played. Like it's likened. I still think the NHL, the NBA, even MLB, those seasons are just simply too much when you look at what those athletes have to do. And then you look at football, like you guys. It's not just the A-League. You guys got to play Asian champs. You've got to play. Some lads need to go to their international duties. There's a lot that you guys need, and that's common across all national football programs, I would say. And it's something that needs to be considered. And I'm glad to see that the industry has picked it up. And like I said, there's so many great minds inside of football, inside of our industry. Had you always had an interest in football? Was that always your sport?
Yeah, it was. Look, my journey started with football, and then I guess I played it growing up, so it was a little bit, it was close to home for me. I loved that. I had a passion for the sport. I understood it, and then I worked when I first started off. I guess I started with an undergraduate degree in exercise and sports science. Moved on to a master's in physio. While I was studying physiotherapy, I was doing a little bit of sports science, strength and conditioning, EP type work, just to get a little bit of income on the side. I then, once graduated as a physio, probably physio became my mainstream line of work. I did a little bit of EP work, helped out with some sports science roles. And obviously, like the next kind of tertiary phase is actually I'm just finishing up a Master of Research now. But yeah,
Congrats.
my yeah, thank you. It's almost done. It's taking a little bit longer than what it should, but the reality of juggling a family and work and education. But yeah, so I probably transitioned into the finishing my degree, Master of Research. I was probably driven a little bit more by the physio side of things. That was where probably most of my headspace was. My passion was in terms of just getting guys right, the injury rehab side of things. But as I evolved as a physiotherapist, I kind of started to get a real appreciation for the sports science side of things. Now, bear in mind, 13, 14 years ago, when I was just coming out as a physio, the sports science world wasn't insane, right? It wasn't this huge, it wasn't what it is now. And so it was almost like it was just starting to evolve. And I think it was difficult to grasp an appreciation for how important sports science and strength and conditioning was when it wasn't so mainstream. And then it just became this thing that everybody was doing, and it was what you implemented to get an edge. So I transitioned. I worked at Sydney University football club there, so soccer football club. I did that for a few years. And then I felt as though that wasn't challenging enough for me. So I wanted to go into rugby. And the reason I wanted to go into rugby was I wanted to be met with a whole bunch of different injuries that I hadn't seen before. I wanted to be challenged.
As a physio?
As a physio.
Yes. Yep.
but I was fortunate enough also because with Sydney Uni Rugby, they're a second tier team. I mean, they're a feeder club to the Tars. They're a feeder club to, I'm not sure if it's, anyway, I don't know if it's still it's not Super 15s anymore, is it? But
well, even right now, it's even more complicated.
Yeah, exactly right. But back then, we had a lot of players who, fed into the Super Rugby program. So we had a semi-professional setup. We had actually, it was quite unique because I don't think it was like that at any other club in the Shute Shield. We had a very, they invested a lot of financial resources, and so I gained a lot of my experience as a physiotherapist, working with a lot of the rugby boys. But I also gained a lot of my experience in the sports science world there because I was working with with an excellent sports scientist at the time, who's now actually moved on to, I think, I could be wrong, but he's moved on to rugby in Ireland, potentially. I could be wrong there. But, so I started to grasp an appreciation for it there. It's when I started to get, I was introduced to GPS data. I was introduced to, the science behind conditioning. And that was intriguing to me. And I thought, you know what, I like this. And so I started to incorporate an element of that into my rehabilitation, because originally it was like, well, as a physiotherapist, you're bred to be injury focused, not performance focused. And for me, that is the biggest problem with physiotherapy today. You go out there going, I'm there to either, and you've probably heard it before, that you have the mentality of, sports science, strength and conditioning, you break them, physios will fix them, right? And I hated that mentality because it didn't make sense to me. I thought we should be working collaboratively to create the best athletes, the most robust athletes. If something goes, happens along the way where that player breaks down, we work together to build them back up again. So I started to then incorporate the sport, the principles of, periodization. I'd grab a lot of the strength and conditioning, the sports science principles, and incorporate them into my rehab. And I saw the results, and I was like, I like this. And so I got a little bit of a taste. And then once I got the taste, it started to, I started to expand, my knowledge base. I wanted to understand sports science better. I wanted to understand conditioning principles better. So whilst I had my degree in exercise sports science, I hadn't practiced it enough, to grasp the appreciation of it. And that's kind of where I started to evolve.
Before we jump down that route from that point on, because I'm very interested in, you mentioned the masters that you're doing at the moment and your appetite and want to have extra knowledge in this space and getting into the various metrics around sports science. And I really want to dive into that because I know how quickly your mind goes and all the ideas that come to you. I've been on the receiving end of a few of those calls. But and initially when you were looking and you came out as a sports scientist, and then you wanted to go into physiotherapy and begin to pursue that, you had mentioned that 13 years ago that sports science wasn't as well known or well practiced as it is now. Was that one of the motivating factors as to why you saw physiotherapy as the next logical step? What was the thought process to get into physiotherapy?
Probably because growing up I had a fair few injuries. I had niggles, and I think I went to a bunch of physios who were just say they weren't very good. Okay. And so I wasn't happy with the treatment that I received. I'd go to a couple of physios and they'd put a few magnets on me, and they'd go, "Yeah, your ankle will be right. These magnets will heal it." Or, it was ridiculous.
That's some voodoo stuff.
Yeah, exactly right. So, I'd go there and they'd put me on the ultrasound for 20 minutes, and that'll do. Swipe your card and off you go. And it was this real kind of passive treatment that I thought was doing nothing for me. And because I had a couple of injuries, I thought there's got to be a better way here. And so I sort of was driven by, I want people to get better. I want to explore that pathway. And so at the time, I loved, don't get me wrong, I loved the exercise sports science. I loved it. When I was studying it, you couldn't get me away from the books. And that's the thing with me. If I enjoy something, I will study it to the nth degree, understand it, and then want to apply it. Now, there were elements of sports science, like embryology, that I had no interest in, for example.
Yeah. You and me both, just quietly.
Exactly right, exactly. But when I went into physio and I studied physio, I enjoyed almost every aspect of it, and I knew, you know what, this is for me. I'm going to
Mm.
enjoy this. And then it became, okay, now I'm sort of grasping the physio side of things. You can always improve in every area, but let's start to go beyond the normal realms of physiotherapy, and that's kind of where probably it's led to where I am now.
Interesting. No, it's a great way to think about your studies, and for people watching. That's where actually just quickly, that's where my life is at. Not necessarily from a study perspective, that too, but I've just found, like, as an example for the training that I've been doing, I was going to the gym, but I watch mixed martial arts every day. So as a fan and a consumer, so it was like, if I love this stuff, let's just go get a sweat on and practice it, get my ass handed to me just just quietly every day, but at least get my workout that way. And I think it's a really nice frame of mind that you just presented. I love this, and I want to put my absolute everything into it, because there's no point finding distractions in other things that you're not 100% into. The transition into high performance, I think those two sets of skills and your ideology and your mindset have really played an integral part of that. How was the transition into becoming a head of performance?
Yeah, okay. So I kind of worked. So I transitioned from Sydney Uni Rugby, and I got a part-time gig at Sydney FC as an assistant physiotherapist at the time, and that quickly evolved to a full-time role because there was a huge demand for it. I was fortunate enough to work under Andrew Clark, who was our head of performance at the time, who's now the FA, so Socceroos head of performance.
Yes.
So, he also had a really good appreciation for the physio side of things. So we were somewhat on a the same wavelength. Now he had a real bias, and he still does, probably a real bias towards the football specific conditioning aspect side of things. He was an ex-player. So probably the greatest thing that I got from him was trying to merge your sports science knowledge with football specific actions, skills, conditioning, etc. Make it as sports specific as you can. I then became the head physiotherapist. I did that for a couple of years. Clarkey moved on to the Socceroos, and he's gone, just sort of get Elias in that position. He's been here the longest. He gets the environment. He's got the background. He's probably the person you want. And I've always been a little bit of probably not a little bit. I've always wanted to lead. I've kind of been that person. I'm always happy to learn and get as much as I can from the people around me, but I'm very much about wanting to lead, kind of have my own little spin on things. And I think that's what drove me down the pathway of wanting to, be the high performance manager as opposed to staying in the physiotherapy role, because that was an option. But yeah, like it's interesting. You can't transition to this role if you're not. I was having this conversation recently with someone. If you're not a generalist, it sounds really silly, but you need to have enough knowledge in every single area of high performance in order for you to be able to do this role. You don't have to be an expert in it, but you certainly have to have enough knowledge to be able to have good people around you. And that's probably one of the trickiest things of the job, making sure that you have enough knowledge in every single area to know that the people that you have around you who are the specialists in their fields are doing it to the best of their ability.
How did you go with someone like the new head of physiotherapy, which was your role, or maybe people inside of sports science, which you do obviously have an interest and a degree in, when you start looking at in having people with you along in the journey, and you're the leader of that group, when they start piping up with ideas because you're giving them that autonomy, how hard is it to not jump in and want to do it because, oh no, I've done it before and it doesn't work like this, or no, I'll do it differently, because you do have a little bit of an ownership over it, hence because it was your role previously. How did you go managing something like that?
I was fortunate. The head physio that we have now, Ibrahim Kerem, he's unbelievable. He's so good. He's in my opinion, he's probably the best rehab physio that I know, his knowledge in the rehab field has exceeded mine. So he's got complete freedom. He's got complete freedom in that front. My job is to sit there and go, I ask the questions. That's my job, to ask the questions, to make sure that everything. So my biggest thing with all of the guys that work in the high performance unit is they can justify every single action. If they're doing something, it has to be justified. If you want to do X drill for X minutes, X number of passes with this particular injury, you better be able to justify why you're doing that. And he has the ability to justify everything. So it's gotten to the point now where I occasionally will ask a question. Now, in saying that, I was also fortunate that he had been working for a couple of years as the assistant physio. So he then transitioned into the head physio role really well, because a lot of the principles that he employs are probably, the principles that I had brought in at the time. He's then just kind of gone, I'm going to take that, I'm going to run with it, and I'm going to bring my own kind of skill set. And he has, and it's actually a breath of fresh air knowing that having him in place and having his own skill set and having his knowledge base, just being able to have that freedom, my and go, I'm comfortable, you do you, and I'm going to leave you to it.
That must be so nice to have, that peace of mind that someone's looking after something that you had to look after for so long. The message that you shared before is something I would think, at least for people that are the head physios or the people that are amongst the team. If you're coming in and trying to put something into the program or start a new initiative, to be able to justify that to the head of performance or whoever it may be with solid facts is going to be important to be able to get everything rolling. What else would you say for people, so let's imagine that you're in, the sports scientist shoes, or you're in the strength and conditioning coach's shoes, and they might want to bring something into the program or start something new, or have a suggestion for you as a high performance manager, forgetting, politics or interrelationships and forgetting that for just a second. How would you recommend that an individual go about putting in a new suggestion, aside from, of course, justifying it very well, like you alluded to before?
Yeah, good. Look, I think you've got to, any new environment, anytime you come into an environment, people will have a bunch of skills. They'll have knowledge in a specific area. They'll have something that they can bring. The way you deliver that information is extremely important. You can't just come in and go, I'm going to change everything because I think this works, and everything you've done in the last 10 years and work towards that's not valuable anymore. So if you're coming in and you want to, you want to express yourself, you've just got to be mindful that it's a drip feeding process. It's not I have all these wonderful ideas, I want to do everything. It's a respecting the processes that are in place, respecting that a club may have had success already with the processes that are in place, and knowing that you may have some wonderful ideas, but you should drip feed those ideas. And probably the biggest thing I would say is going in and asking what your senior thinks about it, versus this is what we should be doing, but what are your thoughts on this, right? And that applies in almost every single field, I think. If you're discussing anything with your manager, it's not a let's do this, it's a what are your thoughts on this? And if you have a good manager, they'll turn around, they'll go, you know what, I hadn't actually thought about that, that's a really good idea. Or they'll say, look, I'm happy for you to explore that. This is what's happened to me in the past. I haven't had success with it, but you are welcome to try that, right? So yeah, for the biggest thing, approaching it in a way where you're almost asking to be granted access as opposed to demanding access.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, I did a little piece on that about 12 months ago. It was about something completely different. It was about a workplace, but it was the exact same principle and pretty much word for word what I was saying to this person not too long ago. So that's fantastic to hear. And I couldn't back that more. You as an individual, like we touched on before, the motor's always going. You've got a lot of ideas, and I think that comes with obviously your nature, but also you have an appreciation for both sides, or shouldn't say both sides, I should say two sides of performance being the physiotherapy and sports science, and then within the leadership role as well, that's also affecting you and the way your mind goes. Just if you don't mind sharing from a personal perspective, I don't see you switching off. I could see, I've spoken to, and it's not a bad thing. I love it. I love your enthusiasm. I love what you bring to the table, and I love the conversations that we've had. And I've heard from Dan Duffield, he loves the conversations as well, or at least he did. But how do you go about settling some of those ideas and those brain waves, and just being like, all right, we're going to leave this at work, we're going to leave this for work time, and now it's time to kick off and get into family, or get into personal, or whatever you're looking to do outside of work?
Okay, the first thing I'll say is, if you work in this industry, you've got to be prepared to sacrifice your social life, because it is extremely, extremely difficult to work in a high performance setup and professional sport and have good work-life balance. It doesn't exist. I'm sorry. It just doesn't exist. You've got to recognize that, okay, I'm going to try and make this work the best I can for me, but in my opinion, there are only a particular, few people that can do that. A lot of the people will just turn around. It's just, I'm not getting enough reward for the amount of time that I put in. And I've seen that a lot. I've seen, people come to me and go, Elias, man, I reckon I've done about, 45 hours this week. I'm done. And I'll just turn around and I'll say, okay, all right, so you've done about half what's required of you for this week. So for me, it's about, I've set myself up on a little routine. I go to work early in the morning, do everything I need to do. Let's say this is a typical day for me. Come home at 5 o'clock, have dinner with the family, bath the kids, read them a story, put them in bed. Then once they've gone to bed, spend a bit of time with Monica, my wife, until she's ready to go to bed and fall asleep. She falls asleep. I'm having a coffee. I'm working for a couple more hours. I'll go to sleep at about, let's say, 1 a.m. and I'm just rinse and repeat. But that works for me. So that actually works really well for me. That may not work for other people. But my ability to get the extra work done, let's say you got the 9 to 5 hours, and then you've got the extra work for me happens between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. That's where I'm getting my extra work done. But in saying that, I enjoy what I do. So that's not me. I'm not pushing a sled uphill when I'm doing that. I'm doing it because I thoroughly enjoy doing it. I want to do it. I don't have to. I can do my job. I don't have to do it as well or as diligently, but I choose to because maybe, number one, I'm proud and I don't really want to make errors. I want to try my hardest not to make an error, but yeah, because I enjoy it as well.
It's a very refreshing message, and I think somewhat of the PR response or this having, we don't work, my role specifically, I don't work in the high performance unit, but we interact with that environment daily, and it just blows me away that the commitment that some / nearly all the staff members that we interact with have for that craft. And it's like you said, it's a reality, and for some it's an unfortunate reality that they only realize when it's a bit too late, but for others like you, it's a reality that they relish. The last thing that I wanted to ask you, and it's a question I ask nearly every guest at the end of the show, is for people that are looking to make a career change or a career shift similar to your, I wouldn't say a career shift, but it was a shift from sports science to physiotherapy. You might have someone who has done something similar and they're looking to make a shift into a new role in the organization. Maybe they've been in sport for a few years and looking to make that change. Or for somebody looking to start their career in our industry, in the sport industry. What words would you have for those individuals before they embark on this either new journey or the beginning of their
journey? The world is currently filled, in my opinion, with people that are entitled, and you need to remove that mindset. You cannot enter this type of industry with an entitled mindset. You need to be willing to work as hard as you possibly can for little to no reward, in order to pave your way into this industry. If you're not prepared to do that, you will never succeed in this industry. It's plain and simple. If you are not prepared to sacrifice your social life, to sacrifice some of your sleep, to work for virtually nothing, then this industry is not for you, because there are limited jobs in this industry, and the people that succeed are the people that actually have those traits that I described there. But I am forever met with, I think it's extremely difficult. We've got one of our interns at the moment he blows me away, because I think we take on students, and it's extremely hard to find somebody who is willing to dedicate their time for minimal reward in the short term. And when I say short term, I'm talking a few years. Where I am now, I'm 14 years down the track from graduating. I still work 70 to 90 hours a week. That's normal for me. And I have done so ever since I graduated. Had I never been prepared to do that, I would never be where I am now. Anybody, regardless of where they are, whether they're just starting off or whether they are 10 years down the track, if they're not prepared to work those hours and sacrifice a little bit of time, then they probably will never succeed. You get that, you're halfway there.
That is an absolute slam dunk ending. I don't think we could have ended it any other way, my friend. Elias, is there anything else that you did want to get off your chest? Is there anything else throughout the journey that you wanted to explain extra, or anything that you were thinking that you would like to pass on before we do wrap up here?
I think the one thing I wouldn't mind having a chat about just briefly is one of the biggest things I've seen evolve over time in across the high performance world is the collaboration between all high performance staff from all different codes, from all different countries. That in itself shows you that the people who are successful are also people who are willing to share their knowledge and their time. Anybody who is not willing to share their knowledge or their time with other people around them often represent people who are either insecure, or they think they found the magic answer to the problems that arise in this industry. I'll tell you now, it is not the case. Everybody's got their own way of doing things. Everybody can find solutions to problems, and it's really refreshing to see that the people that work in the best clubs in the world are the ones who are actually reaching out and trying to get some knowledge from somebody else. Like a perfect example, a year and a half ago, roughly, I was speaking to Martin Boucher. Everybody knows who Martin Boucher is, right? Just chatting to him casually, we played against PSG, and he actually said, "Hey, can I chat to your head of strength and conditioning and your high performance manager? I want to chat to them about some of the challenges they face, and what it's like working at Sydney FC." And it's like, well, hang on a second. This is the Martin Boucher. He's yeah, exactly. And I'm like, dude, you want to listen? You want to hear from me? Like,
yeah.
Who am I? Who are we? And I thought to myself, these are the type of people that work in this industry in the best clubs around the world. They just respect that everybody has something to add, and it's humbling to experience that. So if you're not prepared to be that type of person where you want to share your knowledge, your insights with others, then I don't think you're probably the right personality for this either.
Yeah, the only thing that I can piggyback on that is, even inside of the technology space, there are certain, and not inside of our technology, but just technology broadly, like think Apple or Microsoft or whatever it may be. The companies that have actually just tried to keep their technology what's called closed, so only for them and only for their customers, and they don't want to interact with other vendors and not be what's called open source. They might have the magic bullet for a couple of years, if they do have the magic bullet, that is.
Yeah.
And then someone overtakes them. So that same, someone might have the magic bullet. Let's say they do, right? It's not going to take long for other people to figure it out. And when they do, you're stuffed, because you don't, that person who has been collaborating for so long, has a network of people to bounce these ideas off of, isn't just coming at you as a one-person army. And when I say coming at you, it's not too much of a competition, but you might see it that way because you're the person holding the information in. But they're coming at you with something that has been networked around, and eventually you're going to get overtaken. It's just a reality. And you know, I say that confidently from a tech perspective, and I'm sure you might have examples of individuals that you wouldn't want to share on here that it might have happened to as well, because they were a little too close-minded and weren't able to see the bigger picture and the compounding nature of networking. So that's a fantastic message, mate. I really appreciate you sharing that.
My pleasure.
So that's all we got time for. We're just coming up on the time limit for Elias. He's got to put the kids to bed. We struggled to even get here. There was a few weekends that we missed, and mostly my fault. So no, mostly my fault, mate. Don't worry. So thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of those stories and those messages. I think it's of tremendous value to people. For those that are watching and like what you're seeing, we have our most recent interview just up here, so you can click that if you want to watch that most recent one. And if you want to subscribe, you can click down here. For Elias, I'm James. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.